You've seen them, we've all seen them spread like wildfire online. And let's be honest, maybe we've even been a little tempted by one or two. I'm talking, of course, about conspiracy theories. They're a huge, totally unavoidable part of our world, but they're also incredibly messy, and boy, are they polarizing. So today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to step back from the heated arguments, from the fights over what's true and what's not, and try to understand the why behind it all. We're not here to debunk any specific theory. Nope. Instead, we're going to dig into the psychology, the history, and the politics that make these ideas just so powerful. Let's get into it. So here's the game plan. We're going to break this down into 6 key pieces. We'll kick things off with the absolute basics. What is a conspiracy theory really? Then we'll get right into the human side of things, the fascinating psychology of why people believe. From there, we'll see how these ideas catch fire in the internet age, and then, and this is important, we'll jump back in time to see that this is not a new thing at all. Finally, we'll connect all those pieces to today's political world, and we'll wrap it all up with a way to think about the crazy information overload we're all dealing with. All right, first things first. Before we can get into all the juicy stuff, we have to make sure we're all on the same page. What do we even mean when we say conspiracy theory? It's a phrase we throw around constantly, but you might be surprised to learn how much its meaning has changed. So let's build a solid foundation. Let's start with an example that probably feels familiar, the documentary Loose Change. This thing was a phenomenon. Made on a home computer back in 2005, it just exploded online in the early days of YouTube. I mean, Vanity Fair called it the first internet blockbuster for a reason. Its main claim was, of course, explosive, that 9/11 was an inside job. Loose Change is the perfect place for us to start because it was a real watershed moment. It showed just how powerful the internet could be for spreading a compelling counter-narrative to millions of people, completely bypassing all the traditional media gatekeepers. Okay, now here's something that might actually surprise you. The phrase conspiracy theory didn't used to be a bad thing. Seriously, it wasn't an insult. Originally, it was a totally neutral term. Academics point out it was just a simple, descriptive way to talk about any hypothesis that involved a secret plot. You can think of it like a tool for an investigator or a historian trying to figure out if powerful people were secretly working together. But wow, that is a far cry from how we use that phrase today, isn't it? And this is where the big shift happened. The conversation totally changed. It stopped being about the what, the actual details of the theory, and it became all about the who. It stopped being a discussion about evidence and started being about the type of person who would believe such a thing. The term itself became a label, a kind of shortcut to dismiss not just the idea, but the person holding it. And that is a huge difference, because today, just calling something a conspiracy theory is often the end of the argument. So that brings us to the big question, right? If these theories are so often dismissed, why do so many people find them so compelling? What is going on in our heads? Let's peel back that next layer and get into the psychology of it all. And I gotta tell you, the answer is way more complicated and interesting than you might think. First off, you can just toss out that old stereotype of the lone weirdo in a basement with a tinfoil hat. That's not how it works. Research from places like the Brookings Institution shows that people drawn to these ideas come from everywhere. They actually found 2 main profiles that just shatter that cliché. On one hand, you have the knowledgeable but untrusting. These folks know a lot about how government works, but all that knowledge has just led them to deeply distrust the entire system. And then, on the complete opposite end, you have the news finds me follower. This is someone who's not super into politics, doesn't really follow the news, and just kind of assumes that if something is important, it'll show up on their social media feed. It's incredible. It tells us there's no single type of person. Belief can come from a place of deep engagement or from just passively scrolling. So what's actually happening inside our brains? What needs do these stories satisfy? Well, psychologists have pointed to a few key things. First, our brains are just wired for sense-making. We're pattern-seeking machines. So after a huge, chaotic, scary event, a conspiracy theory can feel really comforting because it offers a simple, complete explanation. Second, it's about identity. It creates a very clear us versus them story. By defining a powerful, evil enemy, it makes our own group feel stronger, like we're the good guys in a secret war. Third is something called agency panic. This is that deep, gut-level fear that we're not really in control of our own lives, that some hidden forces are pulling all the strings. A conspiracy theory actually gives those forces a name, and weirdly, that can make you feel more powerful. And finally, for some, it just comes down to how we think. Some of us are just more likely to trust our gut over slow, careful analysis. Okay, so we're getting a handle on what these theories are and some of the deep psychological reasons they can be so appealing. But how does some niche idea buried on the internet suddenly become a global headline? Let's look at the mechanics of how these things go viral. So here's kind of how the whole thing often plays out. It almost always kicks off with a big real-world event that leaves everyone feeling confused and anxious. It creates this information vacuum. Then a conspiratorial story comes along to fill that vacuum. Next, you get what you could call super spreaders. These could be famous influencers, armies of automated bots, or just really passionate regular people who share the story. And if it hits the right nerve with the right crowd, it can set off a cascade, spreading like crazy inside online echo chambers where everyone already agrees and no challenging information gets in. And what's the engine driving this whole machine? Well, it's us. We've all become what some researchers call prosumers. We're not just passive consumers of media anymore. We are all active producers of it too. I mean, think about it. It used to be that news came from just a handful of TV networks or newspapers. But now with blogs, social media, YouTube, everyone has a megaphone. Anyone can create something that looks slick and professional. The line between a veteran journalist and a passionate amateur has gotten so blurry, and for the average person scrolling their feed, it can be really, really hard to tell the difference. Now look, it is so easy to blame all of this on the internet, on Twitter or Facebook, but that's not the whole story. It's not even close. As we're about to see, this way of thinking has been a super powerful force in society for a long, long time. And you might be really surprised at how mainstream it's been. Let's take a quick trip through history. Back in the 18th century, the American revolutionaries were 100% convinced that King George III was part of a secret plot to enslave them. This wasn't some fringe idea. This was the accepted truth that fueled a revolution. Jump to the 19th century, and you've got entire political parties, like the Anti-Masonic Party, built on the belief that secret societies were running the country. The 20th century saw these ideas weaponized in the most horrific way, with the fake Protocols of the Elders of Zion becoming a justification for the Holocaust. But then, after the 1960s, something fundamental changes. This is the Great Shift. After the shocks of the JFK assassination and Watergate, suspicion turns inward. People start believing the government itself is the one plotting against its own citizens. And it's right around then, in that moment of deep distrust, that the phrase conspiracy theory starts to get the negative meaning it has today. And that history leads us right to our doorstep, to the present day, where conspiracy theories are, without a doubt, a huge force in modern politics. So how exactly do these stories get used as a political tool? To get this, we first need to understand a political style called populism. Now, this isn't a typical ideology with a bunch of rules, like socialism or conservatism. Political scientists say it's more like a framework for seeing the world. And that framework is super simple. It splits society into two groups that are always fighting: the good, pure, everyday people, and the evil, corrupt elites. And this is where it all just clicks into place. Populism and conspiracy theories are like a perfect match. They're fuel for each other's fire. Why? Well, a conspiracy theory gives the populist leader a perfect, ready-made villain. The deep state, the globalists, you name it. It clearly identifies that corrupt elite. It then frames the populist leader as the only one brave enough to tell the forbidden truth. And maybe most importantly, it gives the people a simple, easy-to-understand reason for all of their very real, very complex problems. It's an incredibly powerful political cocktail. So is this kind of thinking just a feature of one side of politics? Not even close. When researchers ask people all over the world whether they believe powerful, secret groups are running things behind the scenes, the results are pretty stunning. This belief pops up all across the political spectrum. It is not a left-wing thing or a right-wing thing, it's a human thing. It's a way of looking at the world that can be adapted to fit just about any ideology. So after all that, where does this leave us? We've covered a ton of ground, from the wiring of our brains to the sweep of history. It's time to put all the pieces together and think about how we can use this to better navigate the complicated and, let's face it, often chaotic information world we all live in. You know, maybe the single biggest takeaway from all of this is that just yelling, "You're wrong," or trying to debunk every single claim, it doesn't really work. It almost never changes anyone's mind. A much more productive goal is understanding. We have to start looking at these theories as a symptom of deeper problems, a sign that people are feeling anxious, powerless, and that they've lost trust in major institutions. By trying to understand the why these stories are so compelling to so many, we can start to address the root causes, and maybe, just maybe, start to have better conversations. And so we're left with a question, and it's a real challenge for every single one of us. In a world where we are just drowning in information and our trust in, Well, almost everything seems to be at an all-time low. How do we find that line? How do we practice healthy skepticism, which is absolutely essential for a free society, without letting it slide into a corrosive, harmful suspicion that sees plots around every corner and trusts no one? Figuring out where that line is, for ourselves and for our society, that might be one of the biggest challenges we face. Thanks for sticking with me.